Esteemed guests of the World Islamic Economic Forum 11 here in Kuala Lumpur, good afternoon, assalamu alaikum, and how are you? My name is Ryan Hilliard. I represent FloodPlains, the portal for peripheral Islamic textual heritage, based in Chicago, Illinois. Let me give you a few facts here. 2004, not in the very recent future, a tsunami wiped out major portions of Southeast Asia, including Indonesia and Malaysia, and also wiped out a number of private libraries and Islamic resources. Fast forward as well to 2013, when an entire library in Timbuktu was burned to the ground by Islamic extremists. And even very recently in the city of Mosul in Iraq, where the so-called ISIS, the so-called organization that represents Islam supposedly, has decided to burn down an entire library of over 300,000 books and manuscripts in Mosul, Iraq. This is unacceptable because this is not only a matter of our own personal heritage and our identity as Muslims, but also the entire world history that is part of all of our shared culture. This destruction of manuscripts and other historical markers is a travesty that needs to be stopped as soon as possible. And at large, Muslim communities that are conversant with these traditional resources cannot access them because of the rarity of these resources. The few manuscripts that are available are being kept in private libraries in universities and institutions around the world, but you and I don't have access to those. Why? Because they're sitting in these basements, in these storage rooms, collecting dust and turning into dust themselves. And this is unacceptable as well, where you have on one side extremists who would rather destroy them and burn them to the ground, and academics on the other side who would rather have them sit here and not have the people that wrote them and the communities that can benefit from them the most truly be able to access them. And so this is the mission of FloodPlains, to be able to provide this and to serve as an agent to these private institution holdings, of course with the correct permissions, and to expand our web platform to make sure that you have access to these manuscripts, access to the knowledge that's truly contained in these wonderful aspects of our history and our shared culture, and be able to benefit from them for yourself, for your children, and your children's children thereafter. And also to present scholars who are conversant, again, with this tradition and with your history and with your culture and with your identity as a Muslim and in your faith, to be able to teach them to the generations to come and also be able to carry your history into the future. Who cares about this? These are some random libraries in the middle of the desert or in the jungles of Indonesia. You're wrong. Those people that think that people don't care, take a look at this map right here. You have people in Canada, the United States, Brazil, South Africa, Australia, English-speaking countries that are interested in your culture and your heritage. Why? Because this is a global responsibility. These are the people that truly care about where our history is coming from and where it's going. FloodPlains, alhamdulillah, has regular hits for its website and for the resources that we provide on a daily basis of 200 daily sessions. And 78% of those are new readers every day. And the readership comes from the US, the UK, and other predominantly English-speaking communities. Our market competition is very slim. Only a few organizations like mine that are out there right now. One of them is Seeker's Guidance, which again provides that kind of teaching of those resources, but only rehashes the topics that you already know, such as Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi, Imam al-Ghazali, and others that are coming from the center of the Islamic textual tradition. So what FloodPlains is aiming to do is to provide Islamic scholarship for the layman approach, for people like you and me who aren't necessarily always conversant in Arabic or aren't sitting down to become a scholar, but can take these resources and be able to provide them to our children and to be able to embody them in ourselves. Because true knowledge is not necessarily in the bellies of books, but in the hearts of men. But what happens when our scholars decide to be able to take that, take their hearts, take their knowledge and their souls, and bleed them onto these papers and through their pen, so that you can continue to make sure that you know where your heritage is coming from and your identity as a Muslim and as a human being. For our business model, it's very straightforward, where we provide research and preliminary sourcing of where these manuscripts are located, how we can get our hands on them and make sure that they are being preserved correctly, and that we're able to provide open access for them. Gaining permissions and acquisitions of these manuscripts is important as well, because we want to make sure that we're providing the right amount of permission and attribution to the right people. Also, project production, the actual translations themselves, bringing them into digital archiving so that you can actually see the manuscripts themselves, so that you know exactly where this information is coming from, and it's not just somebody deciding to translate and then translate it into however they wish and then presenting it to you, like many things are on the internet. And also uploading it for a public subscription market, where we have a tiered level of subscription where people can purchase the availability of these manuscripts and their translations and the scholars to teach them on a very affordable basis. We already have the capacity and the scholars that are working with us now from wonderful institutions like Columbia University, the University of Michigan, Universität Beirut in Germany, and the International Federation of Reproduction Rights and Organizations. Also, many of our partner scholars are Ivy League scholars and are at the top of their game in terms of being able to know the context and be able to provide it for you the correct way, and not how some of these extremist organizations and people that don't know are presenting information and about our own faith now. We already have a forming board member of advisors and a team of translators that are willing and ready to be able to provide these resources to you in a reasonable time and with the utmost professionality. So, to wrap up, FloodPlains is looking for an initial infusion of roughly about $200,000 to begin not only the acquisition process, but also to make sure that the translators and the scholars that are going to be putting forward these wonderful resources are remunerated for their work and their expertise. Because above all, it is not about one thing is to be about preserving the books themselves, but another entirely to make sure that the right people that embody this true knowledge, that embody the true spirit of our faith, of our Deen of Islam, are the ones that are teaching your children and the generations to come about what our faith really is about, and not leaving it in the hands of these extremists and these other people that don't have the correct knowledge and don't have the history and would rather destroy our history rather than be able to preserve it and make sure that it's a part of our identity for the generations to come. And that's all I have to present. Again, my name is Ryan Hilliard from Chicago. I don't know a lot, but all I know is that this is my history. This is my tradition. As a Muslim that just recently embraced Islam in 2006, I want to make sure that I know where my faith is coming from and where my heritage is coming from and be able to pass it on to my children. I have a baby daughter who is 2.5 months old. I want to make sure that she knows where her history comes from and where it's going, and that she can take it to the next direction. And I hope that FloodPlains will be able to do so, and it will only be able to do so with your help, with your support, and even if you're not able to provide that fiscally or in an advisory capacity, with your prayers, with your well wishes, and with your advice. Thank you very much for your time. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you, Ryan, for that. Do we have any questions for Ryan? What I can think of is when you explore Southeast Asia, which has its own rich history of Islam, how will you verify these manuscripts? What's the process like?
The process of verification is very similar to the steps I've already taken in areas such as West Africa, where I initially started FloodPlains to begin to serve. When I approached local scholars and people that are at the top of their field in West African Islamic studies, I wanted to make sure that they were the ones that actually had the tradition, or what they call in Islamic terminology, the isnad, or chain of transmission to these manuscripts and to the knowledge that's contained therein. Because many of these teachers have teachers who have teachers who have teachers who have teachers that lead all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And that's very important because that authenticity, that true authenticity is what we're looking for and is the verifying aspect of what separates what the opportunities and the resources that FloodPlains is providing from other things that you might see on the internet and especially from other extremist groups. Now, that will be our approach as well for Southeast Asia because we know that you have a wonderful and very rich Islamic history here, one that cannot be excluded or looked over because it's not the Middle East, because it's not North Africa. However, it is important to know that you still have that chain of transmission. You still have that conversation between Southeast Asia as its own standalone Islamic society and those in Baghdad, those that are in Syria, those that are in Egypt, and in Mecca and Medina as well. You're in conversation with that. That is part of your shared history. So to be able to highlight that is part, and also to show where that chain of transmission comes from is how we would also approach Southeast Asia as well, inshallah.
Do we have any other questions for Ryan from the floor?
If you don't have any questions right
we
now.
do. Ryan, there's one question over there from Omar.
Yes, sir.
Great presentation, Ryan, but you also said you wanted to make this useful for the younger generation. So have you thought about like bringing them in and making them useful for the madrasas and the communities that are going to be in maybe, you know, Southeast Asia and West Africa and places like that, rather than just the academic institutions, which sometimes are, you know, not that strong compared to the US? So have you thought about that as well?
Thank you very much for that question, and that's part of the approach that FloodPlains wants to take. Is again providing Islamic, traditional Islamic information and knowledge for the layman, for regular people like you and I. I want to be able to teach. I want to be able to teach what's in these manuscripts to my daughter in a one-on-one basis in the comfort of our home, right? And so these are, you know, and this is something that we are very keen about providing. Is that the translations and the work that we're providing in order to preserve these manuscripts and make them available in English will also be presented in such a format that so that when the teachers and the scholars who are actually going to be teaching from these manuscripts online to you in the comfort of your home through a streaming online process or a streaming online platform, you'll be able to take that knowledge at home and then be able to sit around the computer with this computer or the TV with your daughter or with your son and be able to teach it to your children. Madrasas and darajis and other other on the ground Islamic learning platforms will also be able to use this as well because it'll be practical. It'll be have plain language that is accessible and useful for not only the academics but also for people like you and I. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. If you would like to engage with Ryan, he will be here off stage as well. Thank you so much, Ryan, for coming all the way and sharing truly profound information. I believe a lot of us are very excited about FloodPlains.